Points make prizes in Formula One, and to win the big ones, you'll need both drivers contributing across the season. Hello, folks. Welcome to Grid Talk. My name's Aaron Harper, and today we're here to discuss the 2024 F1 driver pairings. Joining me today are Grid Talk host Tom Downey.
Hello.
Grid Talk host Owain Medford.
Hello.
And Hit the Apex's Jawad Yakub.
Hello.
Before we get stuck into this episode, we must thank our sponsor for today, BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games. Available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use the mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BetOnline, where the game starts. And also make sure you follow us on all of our social channels at GridTalk UK to stay up to date with the show. So, what are we doing here today? Podcast or ping pong? Well, we've canvassed the opinions of our group of GridTalk panellists and ranked the duos competing in the 2024 F1 season, all hoping to help their teams to the best possible Constructors' Championship finish this year. We've ranked the teammates from 1st to 10th and have established today's ranking based on each pair's average position. So we'll get things started with the team bottom of the table, and that is Sauber in 10th place. The highest placing they got was 6th, and they got a lowest placing of 10th. 5 people put them in 5th, including all of us here today on the show. Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu are decent drivers on their day. Bottas is even a winner of some 9 Grand Prix. But I feel this is a lineup that's dishwater. Is that something you would agree with, Owain?
Yeah, like if I was to pick a colour to represent these two drivers, and I mean it in the nicest possible way. Obviously, Valtteri Bottas is a race winner, and Guanyu Zhou has shown that he's got some promise on occasion, but it is only on occasion. But they'd just be Magnolia. Like, that's all they'd be if you watch it. Like, I'm gesturing at the walls behind me if you're watching on the video podcast. But yeah, no, they've had almost the most amount of retirements last season. Those aren't going to entirely be driver error. But the most exciting thing about Bottas is his physical appearance on occasion, and that comes through on the calendar that he's done. Like, other than that, Guanyu Zhou is an okay driver, but he does seem to be of the kind of driver that he's not like Yuki, where he does seem to have that X factor on occasion. Like, he seems decent enough. He seems a bit more like, I don't want to say it, but he seems almost like a marketing driver if you're Alfa Romeo, or formerly Alfa Romeo, and wanted to sell some cars over in China. But beyond that, there's just nothing. You're not seeing any spectacular results out of them. And I think the biggest thing about it is that, as far as I can tell, that even Haas finished higher than them, but the highest place finish last in this unique opportunity we have this year to look at the performances of all the drivers last year in comparison to what they could do this year. They didn't even finish as high as Haas did at any point. The highest place was 8th, and I think that's why, honestly, they've been to take this sort of ignominy of the 10th place, the worst driver pairing that we see on the grid. Like I say, and that includes Bottas being a proven race winner and a decent one-lap qualifier on occasion. But I think it's just the ability they have is not to overcome the car, and that's usually the mark of good drivers and a good driver pairing in this case.
Yeah, so that leaves Sauber, or whatever they're going to be called, bottom of the pile. They'll be hoping that they don't actually finish there in the Constructors' Championship. You could argue perhaps that if there was a stronger second driver, we might see a better version of Bottas. But we'll move on to a team you mentioned there, Owain, in Haas, who this week parted company with their longtime team principal, Günther Steiner. Now, they were placed 5th by one of our panellists, and they got a lowest placing of 10th. Jawad, Owain and I each placed them in 9th. Tom, you ranked them in 8th. And now their drivers, Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen, were both brought in by Günther Steiner. There's plenty of experience in this pair, Jawad, and they've got pace. Is this ranking maybe more reflective of the car's performance than the drivers?
Yeah, I think a little bit. it is, but I'm also still yet to feel convinced by Magnussen in particular. I know Magnussen, when he returned in 2022 alongside Mick Schumacher, kind of walked all over the then second-year F1 driver. But then when Hulkenberg was brought back last year after 3 years on the sidelines, not having a full-time drive, it almost seemed natural to Hulkenberg compared to Magnussen. And, I've been a fan of Magnussen since he made his debut with McLaren 10 years ago now, which will be the case, and he scored that infamous podium on debut as well. But I just feel like, even if it is to do with the car or not, he's got those peaks, he's got those troughs, and we've seen so many of those troughs, which unfortunately bring this lineup down the order, I feel. Hulkenberg on his day is consistent, and he was ultimately brought into the team by Steiner, who's no longer with Haas, as you mentioned, to bring that consistency experience to the lineup instead of Schumacher, who unfortunately was making incidents. So, it's going to be a tricky one they can easily prove us all wrong and prove that they're very much in the midfield this year, and both drivers will put in great performances. But based off what we saw last year, it's really hard to say. And while I'm going to rate Hulkenberg, Magnussen's still the questionable one to me. So I guess now the direction that, Gene Haas wants to go in with his new team principal, Io Komatsu, more of an engineering focus. They reckon that they can unlock more from the package that they've currently been optimizing. If that ends up being the case, which will be best case scenario for Gene, of course, with the decision he's made, then we'll naturally see more from these drivers. But if not, and, I've read quotes from Magnussen saying, well, the fact that we've still got pit stop rattle guns from like 2016, of course we need investment in the team, then it's, they're probably going to finish at the bottom of the Constructors table. And if there's no changes made going into 2025, we'll probably be sitting here this time next year, putting them right at the bottom of the table in terms of driver.
Yeah, let's hope that Io Komatsu can get more out of the team. And it's a bit of a hero or zero move from Gene Haas, isn't it? He doesn't really seem to want to put in the investment, but he wants to try and get more out of what they've got. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and it'll go one way or the other. We'll have to wait and see on that. Let's move on to 8th place in our rankings, and that goes to Williams. They were placed highest in 7th by 2 of our panellists, and they were given a lowest placing of 10th. Jawad and I had them in 8th. Owain was one of those 2 people who put them in 7th. Tom, you put them in 9th. Now, there's no denying that Albon is a quality driver, but Logan Sargent left a lot to be desired at times in 2023. Personally, I feel this is quite a fair position for their ranking, and most of the points are probably coming from one side of the garage, aren't they, Tom?
Well, let's be real, all of the points came from one side of the garage, because Sargent, yes, he got 1 point, but that's because 2 drivers got disqualified and he moved up the grid. He didn't get there on pace, if we're being real. And Albon is a decent driver, and if you look at the driver that he was when he was ousted from Red Bull, he was almost sort of like a broken man, and then he's come into Williams. He's had 2 seasons there now, and he's been absolutely doing bits. Especially in the Williams of 2022 when it wasn't really that good. It felt like that team had taken a step backwards. He outperformed the Tiffy, not difficult, and then again got the majority of the points. Done some interesting strategies like Australia 2022 boxing on the last lap, that kind of thing. So he's there's no questioning like Albon is decent, and the direction the team's taken as a whole over 2023 is definitely only emphasised that. But what the direction that the team took in 2023 is also emphasised is the almost vast gulf between him, and that's no pun on their sponsor, by the way. He's sort of emphasised the gulf that's between himself and Logie Bear in the other car. So Sargent is obviously the weak link, and we've got a few teams up and down the grid which are sort of quite heavily imbalanced. I don't think Williams is the biggest example of that. I think we'll come on to the other one later on. Cough, Aston Martin. Sorry, but yeah, Sargent. There were times when Albon was putting his car, sort of like right up there in the midfield. If he was qualifying in like P12, P13. And Sargent was stuck languishing in like P19, only out qualifying one of the Haas or one of the Saubers or whatever they're called this week. So, I stand by what I said when I ranked them 9th, because Sargent is such I don't want to say dead weight because that sounds harsh, but, Sargent is such the sort of weak link in that team. And because both drivers aren't sort of like, they haven't got one driver who is like as sort of like head and shoulders above the rest if you compare them to like Aston Martin or something, because obviously Alonso is Alonso. That's why I think Williams are just, this driver pairing is just a little bit further back. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Sargent is Sargent. He just, whenever he had an opportunity in 2023, look at Zandvoort, he banged it in the wall twice in 2 days. So I do think he got better towards the end of the season, but the bar was pretty low with.
Yeah, it's tricky, obviously, for a rookie coming in. The cars are so technical now that they can be a bit tricky to drive. Hopefully we see a better Logan Sargent this year, and this pairing can move forward in both our rankings and in the Constructors' Championship. They've secured their future partnership with Mercedes through to 2026 and beyond with the power units. So, yeah, they're closely aligned with one of F1's biggest teams, and hopefully Williams are on the right track to gain towards the front again. Let's go to our next team then. P7 goes to AlphaTauri. That's what they're called at the moment. That is subject to change. Racing Bulls or whatever they might be. Maybe just call them Minardi. I think everyone would appreciate that. They were highest placed in 5th position, and 2 people placed them 8th as their lowest. Tom had them 6th. Jawad and I had them 7th. You were one of those 2 people ranking them 8th. It's kind of hard to know exactly who's actually going to be behind the wheel of one of Red Bull's second team's cars in any given season, and sometimes even from weekend to weekend. But is this the strongest pairing in the former Minardi's team history, Owen?
Easily, which I think says a lot about their previous pairings. I mean, I think we've got the kind of weird scenario in that we've got an AlphaTauri team who's not kind of being used in the way that they have previously. I think Red Bull have, the Red Bull machine has cycled through so many drivers that we've now had to bring. We've got Yuki Tsunoda from the Honda connection, obviously, and how Marco seems to think very highly of him. I think less so. I think he has flashes of brilliance, but a lot of the time, he pushes a little bit too hard and causes himself issues. And Daniel Ricciardo, obviously, is a proven race winner, a proven, we thought it was a mercurial talent when he came into the sport, and particularly when he sort of challenged Max Verstappen. Obviously, had a rough period, out in the cold, as it both sort of at Renault and then particularly McLaren. He seems to have shown promise, as we know, but I think there's just the weird. It was almost a rookie mistake that put him out for 5 races, and he wasn't sort of setting the world alight. Maybe that was the car prior to that, and I just think that maybe there was a little bit of, that it's just a bit too tumultuous. I think if you're a team, you really want some sort of stable kind of result, and you're not currently getting that out of Ricciardo. Maybe I would absolutely love to be proved wrong by both of these guys. I think maybe the 3rd season of these cars, maybe the car gets better and the drivers get more comfortable, and more settled, and like I say, it's sort of a known driver lineup now, and hopefully they can extract good results, and we'll have a better rating for them. But I think as a driver pairing right now, they're just a little bit too all over the place, and I think maybe I've been a little bit harsh and taken their bad moments more than their good, and other people maybe have taken their good moments more than their bad. I think multiplied together, we've probably ended up with the right placing for these 2 drivers on average. I think it's a promising driver lineup, but I think it maybe has a little bit left.
No, I agree. I think it's a fair positioning, because even amongst ourselves, their average would probably be 7th, Tom 6th, Jawad and I 7th, and Owen, you had them 8th. So again, like you say, it depends on where you focus. Whether you focus on their pros or whether you focus a bit more on the drawbacks of that pairing. Right, let's move to P6. The best of the bad bunch is Aston Martin. They were placed as high as 4th by 2 people, and someone actually placed them 10th. Jawad and I had them in 5th. Tom, you had them in 7th. Owain, you were one of those people ranking them in the top 4. I'm quite surprised that a team with Fernando Alonso in it has somehow managed to rank outside the top 5. Are you surprised by this as well, Jawad? Does it perhaps show that Alonso's skills are finally on the wane?
I think it's more so to do with his teammate, I'd say. It's lucky, like, I don't know whoever did rank him in 4th, what they were thinking. Maybe they perhaps rated Lance Stroll a bit better. But honestly, I tried my best to not let the worst of Stroll dictate my rating in this respect, because when you look at the way he ended last year, he had a pair of 5ths in the last, 2 of the last 3 races, and then scored points in Abu Dhabi as well. Yet, what is still going to remain a galling statistic is that with a car that was capable potentially of winning a race, we'll never know, in the early part of last year, he failed to record a podium. But this is a driver that, we're reminded by the Stroll faithful that has a pole position. He's got a couple of podiums. He scored a podium in 2017 Williams, which, was not the most desirable of the Williams cars. So I like to think with a bit of optimism, finally Stroll will get his act together. I won't be too disappointed if he doesn't, but obviously 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso last year was very much a renaissance year, which, I know, Aaron, you don't want to hear that, but, he did put together a season which, we're used to from vintage Alonso, who just manages to pull out results. It managed to extract the most out of the car when it was at its best. But then, when it did struggle, we saw the dark side of Alonso emerge. He did get a bit catty over the radio. Yes, we didn't hear GP2 engine, but I reckon we weren't far off from that. So, if everything is going swimmingly, which, let's all say best case scenario, because we don't know what the cars are going to be like this year, that, on paper, this could be a lineup that, can cause trouble. You look back to 12 months ago when they launched the AMR 21, Alonso was very much hyping up his teammates, saying, he could be world champion on a Sunday. So, if we're going to drink that Kool-Aid, then, yeah, by all means, they could be the 5th best lineup to look forward to. But then potentially whoever did rank them 10th, could end up that way, because Alonso will quit halfway through the season if the car doesn't feel right. And yeah, Stroll will just do Stroll things.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of tongue-in-cheek with Alonso. He is a fantastic performer in a Formula One car, but like you said, we do see the dark side of him come out sometimes. He's very, very demanding, isn't he, Fernando? So that is the bottom 5. And before we move on to the team we've ranked in P5, if you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of those 72% people who aren't yet subscribed to the channel on YouTube, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. Doing this really helps the channel out and helps us reach more Formula One fans. So let's get on to that aforementioned 5th placed team. It's Alpine. They were placed actually as high as 3rd, and they were placed as low as 7th. Tom, you had them in 5th. I and Zhao had them in 6th. So this is kind of a sort of spot on, I think, their positioning. Bit of a surprise to me that Alpine are above Aston Martin, but Gasly and Ocon are a solid enough pairing, both race winners, of course, even if behind the scenes at the French team, it's just a revolving door of various F1 personnel. Tom, what do you make of this pairing?
I think when people are sort of talking about Alpine and sort of, with this one is sort of like what I said about Williams, and the whole point of this show is we're talking about driver pairings, not about the team. And if you look at the driver pairing of Gasly and Ocon, they both had a podium this year. Just whenever I say this, I mean 2023. I know we're in 2024, but fight me hard. And also, Gasly had a P3 finish in the sprint in Belgium, so 2 podiums, but 1 Grand Prix podium, 1 sprint. Well done, mate. I think that's what we call the podiums for sprinters. Well done, kid. So if you look at that, they're very evenly matched. Obviously, Ocon got that Super P3 in Monaco after a great qualifying performance. They both won a race each, through a bit of help from external factors. Obviously, Ocon won for Alpine a couple of years ago at Hungary, and that's it with that win for AlphaTauri and Monza, emulating Seb. It's it's a shame the Red Bull didn't work out. It's the actual driver pairing, I think they're very sort of like evenly matched. They were pretty even in terms of, like qualifying head to heads and race finishing head to heads. Ocon had a bit of trouble with reliability. Like when we went bang in Singapore, he was on for a pretty good finish in Singapore, so that does skew the results a bit. But all in all, Alpine, the drivers are really, really evenly matched, I'd say. There was some rumours that perhaps they didn't get on that well with each other because there was a bit of sort of history of when they were in karting or when they were in junior formula. But if that has happened, we haven't really seen it in the public eye. It's been nipped in the bud. That would have likely been talked about beforehand anyway by whoever the team principal is this week. And yeah, I think the driver pairing themselves is pretty decent. I don't think now, they both had very good junior formula careers. I saw Ocon racing in 2015 in GP3 as it was at the time, and he stormed to that title. And then 2016 he was in, I think, Super Formula. I can't remember. Then he obviously got the call at Manor, and then went to Force India, and then obviously now at Renault, aka Alpine. Gasly, we all know, what happened with him. Came in midway through 2017, and all the rest of it. Took the scenic route, ended up at the same team. So it's they're good drivers. Do I think either of them could really sort of if Alpine found themselves in a place they were the top team? I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. But do I think that if Alpine found themselves leading the pack one year, could one of them actually sustain the title challenge? I don't think either of the drivers has that in them. I think they're both solid drivers. I think they complement each other. I think the driver sort of I think from what we've seen on track and perhaps what we haven't seen, it looks like the driver pairing's been handled quite well. And I think with Alpine, the issue is with the team itself, which I'm not going to talk about because that's not directly relevant. I'm trying to focus on the drivers. And I think the drivers complement themselves, but the team is an absolute doo-doo show.
Yeah, I think the pair conducted themselves quite well, actually, in a show that they were being big boys about what happened before they'd both grown up. And, obviously, time passes, time's a good healer, and they've moved on, and they did a pretty decent job last season, all things considered. Let's move on to our top four then. And in fourth place is Red Bull. And they were only placed as high as fourth by all of our panel. 7 people did that. They were placed as low as 7th, though, by one panelist. Tom, Jawad, and myself had them as 4th best. Owain, you had them just behind in 5th. It's kind of a, am I reading this correctly scenario, isn't it? The champion team of the last 2 seasons has, according to our panel, only the 4th best lineup. Surely Sergio Perez isn't that bad, is he, Owain?
I think he is. I absolutely think he is. I think, he's got under half the points of Max Verstappen, and that's not how the points play out. That's not how they're given out, which tells you one thing. You get roughly 2/3 of the points in second compared to finishing in first, not including sprint races and stuff, not including the well done. But yeah, I think that's indicative of, if he's got, just under half or about half, that I think that actually says more about his finishing position, which is, it's not where, we've tried not to look at car performance, but I think in this case it's prudent to look at car performance. That is statistically the most dominant F1 car of all time. If you look at Grand Prix victories, 21 out of 22 races, that's a 95% win rate. That's more than the MP44, which previously held the record. And yet, and by that measure, Sergio Perez should have been getting second places all of the time. Bar the odd people running into him or things like that. But we saw even as late as Singapore, which admittedly was a bad weekend, and it was actually remarkably one of the closer of the weekends. In Singapore and Qatar and things like that, you saw Sergio Perez fighting it out with the backmarkers, even in Japan as well, where he retired. And I think that says so much about the driver pairing. It is a pairing. Max Verstappen, pretty much beyond very few things that he could have done better in this season, beyond inspire his team to maybe set up a car better for Singapore and win that race. But beyond that, they should have won everything else. And, it should have been 1-2 victories across the board, and he didn't do that because I don't think he's as good of a driver. And we've come to this conclusion many a time on GridTalk. But yeah, I think he drags down the average of the whole team. It's not a good pairing. It may be a good thing. It's maybe what Red Bull need because of their, well, I'll be honest with you, inability to manage two drivers. We saw that with a slightly closer pairing of Webber and Vettel, and they couldn't do that. Or Ricciardo in his prime days and Verstappen. They are unable to manage that relationship and seemingly unwilling to. And as a result, they then have to sort of lump it with a subpar driver pairing. Sorry, excuse me. And I think that says a lot about this is the first time, 2023 was the first time that they ever had they've had a 1-2 in the drivers standing. Every other time they haven't done that, even when they've won the championship. So I think that says an awful lot about their philosophy as a team. But yeah, they have to hope that their second driver is good enough but not too good, and I think that hurts them, honestly.
Yeah, I think if the field is a bit closer at the front this season, we might see Red Bull miss out potentially on that Constructors' Championship position, because there are now, according to our panel, 3 teams with better balanced driver pairings ahead of them. And one of those, in third place, is Mercedes. And 4 of our panel rated them as the top pairing, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, that is. And they were actually placed as low as 10th by someone who will remain nameless, but they know who they are. Jawad, you and I had them top of the table. Owain, you had them second. Tom had them in third. I'll admit it, I can't understand how a driver pairing with 104 Grand Prix wins between them is only third best, but I'll leave that earlier statement about the lowest placing for you lot to make up your minds about why. So, Jawad, other than them being placed in 10th, explain how this has happened.
That they're 10th or they're the best driver pairing on the grid?
They're the third best.
They're the third best. Look, I guess when we get to the pointy end and looking at sort of the top 3 lineups that we do have on average, it was really difficult to pick. And, when we get to number 1, I'll be like, look, they're my team. They're a lot of our team on GridTalk, but, there is a bit of rationality that comes into it too. And yes, it's early days this year, so I'm still thinking with my rational brain. And yeah, between Hamilton and Russell, look, for me, Russell in 2023 did seem a little bit out of his depth. There was mistakes. He had a bit of bad luck with reliability and whatnot, but ultimately, we saw the class of a 7-time world champion extract every little bit out of a car that, we know that he doesn't like, he's not comfortable with. He could easily kick stones and, do a Fernando Alonso, as we've seen on numerous occasions through the Spaniard's career when he's had a bad car. But he persisted and somehow dragged, this team to second in the Constructors, where arguably Ferrari had the faster car on paper. And, albeit this is not a discussion about team performance and cars, but it was purely driver performance for me last year that saw Mercedes take second. And on his day too, Russell performed quite well. And we saw the couple of podiums he did get, that it was well executed. You go back to 2022 when he did take his maiden Grand Prix win, his form was sensational. So I feel like, other than internal conflict, which is quite possible given that we've seen it at Mercedes before when both drivers have been really competitive and in a position to fight for world championships, not guarantee that that'll be the case because the caliber of drivers is that high that we see this tension. So the fact that, myself and you, Aaron, have rated them number 1 also comes with a caution that, there could be some tension this year too. And part of me also wants to see that. I think there was that whole thing with Bottas, how, Hamilton enjoyed the years with Valtteri because there was no tension like he had with Rosberg, and then as soon as you get the young upstart in Russell come in, you expected there to be chaos and it to go back to the Rosberg-Hamilton tension. But because you kind of have to put that aside and work towards a common goal of making the car and the team competitive again, kind of gets put aside. So hopefully if the car can be quicker and in contention for wins this year, we'll see these two at their very best. And I think at their very best, they are very much the best lineup on the grid currently.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to dispute that they are at least one of the strongest pairings, if not the strongest. And I think the ratings, the positions that we four have given them reflects that. And it's very, very close between the top three, really. So we'll move on to the team in second, and that is Ferrari. They were placed as high as first by one of our panelists, but 6 of us placed them in third. Tom, you and I had them in second position. Owain and Jawad, you had them in third. Leclerc and Sainz are a very good pairing, and the monogas driver has that X factor of blinding speed, but Sainz maybe has the edge when it comes to racecraft. Tom, do you agree with their placing in this ranking?
Just about, like you said, these top 3 teams are so close in terms of these driver pairings. And I ummed and ahed about over who I was going to put first and second between McLaren and Ferrari. Ultimately, I put Ferrari where I did. I think Sainz is criminally underrated in F1. Yes, he's that bit older. He didn't come in and set the world alight. Like Leclerc or like Hamilton or Norris, Verstappen. Those kind of drivers. He sort of took his time. It took him longer to get accustomed to F1. He started F1 in 2015. Let's not forget. Alongside Max in the Toro Rosso as it was. He was a bit of a late bloomer, and his career was perhaps almost sort of on the ropes. He went to Renault and then had a season and a half there. Then went to McLaren. Obviously, got that podium in 2019 in that fantastic Brazilian Grand Prix, and then obviously jumped ship to Ferrari when Danny Rick joined McLaren. And I think a lot of us at the time were thinking that he was going to be very much the number 2 driver and all the rest of it. But if you look at 2021. Bear in mind, Leclerc had 2 pole positions. Now, I know he had a DNS in Monaco that year. Sainz outscored him in terms of points. 2022, yes, Leclerc won more. But I think arguably Sainz was hit more by the reliability issues of the Ferrari that year. I think it was just more pronounced with Leclerc because he was leading when his engine went pop. And I think a big turning point for Sainz was when he won in Silverstone. And then, he was doing really well in the following race in Austria before his engine turned into it. And then if you look at the 2023 season, he got 2 good pole positions, Monza and I can't remember where the one was. Oh, Singapore. Of course it was. Duh. And then, I think what Sainz showed in that race in Singapore, that was his most complete performance to date. It's like, when his race engineer was saying, landed behind with DRS, he said it's on purpose. That says so much about how I really like Carlos Sainz. Perhaps my sort of viewpoint is perhaps a little bit biased on this. If it comes across as that, well, I'm not going to apologise because I like Sainz and I think he is a good driver. Leclerc is better over one lap. There is no questioning that Leclerc is better over one lap. And we've seen Leclerc is one of those generational talents. We saw how he sort of like mopped up in GP3 and then F2 or. I think it was still GP3 when he won it. He won back to back, and you only see that with the likes of like the next best thing. George Russell's. Yes, I said that. I think Norris could have done that. Had that 2018 F2 if he'd not been absolutely stacked with talent and Nick de Vries. And that's why I think those two are so closely matched. I think Leclerc's obviously got the edge when it comes to outright speed. I don't think there's any denying that. But Sainz, his racecraft, the way he's matured, and I think because Sainz is that little bit older, he's the same age as me. So why am I not in a Ferrari? I know why. I'm too fat. It's Sainz has got that racecraft. He's got that sort of like he's got that sort of critical thinking, and whilst, he might not be qualifying quite as high up the field, he knows what he's doing, and he's got 2 race wins under his belt now. And I know that might not sound like a lot, but if you look at sort of like how much of a complete driver he's becoming, combine that with Leclerc's absolute raw speed and, ability to pull a lap out. If you look at some of the pole positions he got in 2021, that's why I think those two are so evenly matched.
Yeah, it's a very balanced lineup there. Maybe you even get to the point where you've got all the right skills in the team, but they're actually just sort of split too evenly across each driver. So the team might see one driver do well in one session and another in a different session. It might be a little bit imbalanced in that sense, but certainly 2 drivers who can get the job done if they're given the right machinery. So top spot goes to McLaren. It's an early win for the Papaya team this season then, as they top our list. 5 of our panel had them in first. 1 person had them in third, and that was me. I'll be honest, I couldn't put them first because they don't have any Grand Prix wins. If they had a single Grand Prix win, they'd have been at least second for me. Jawad, you placed them second. Owain and Tom, you placed them top. Obviously, Oscar Piastri is going into his second F1 season. He finished last season pretty strongly, actually, with a very, very good rookie year. And Lando Norris is simply counting down the days to that first victory. I'm going to come to all of you on this, and obviously a little bit conscious for time. If you can keep your answers shorter on this, would be a bit more concise, that would be great. Owain, surely this ranking is just all based on...
I don't think it is. I think Piastri is clearly, he was clearly worth the legal fight. Norris is a proven, a proven sort of driver with the ability to win races apart from a couple of hiccups here and there. The team has, I think, the most second places outside of Red Bull. And admittedly, that came with a car upgrade, but let's be honest, it's Formula One. The car is a lot of your sort of performance. And I think that the 2 drivers are extracting kind of almost, very, very near the maximum in what is quite a congested, tumultuous second place spot. So I have no qualms about giving them second place. And I think with a slightly better car, they can challenge for the titles.
Jawad, if that does happen and the car gets better and they're challenging for potential race victories, maybe even fighting with Red Bull, maybe Mercedes, and it becomes a 4-way scrap at the front, is this a lineup that has the chance to actually become the most combustible on the grid? We mentioned earlier, obviously you mentioned it, the George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, there could be some friction there, but with the potential in this team and for it to be a long-lasting rivalry, is that a possibility at McLaren? They're going to have to manage this dynamic?
Absolutely, and we saw flashes of it last year. What we got with Oscar and what we've seen with Oscar so far is that he is very level-headed, he's cool, mature as well, and in his rookie year, he wasn't trying to step on toes, and when he was asked to move aside for his more experienced teammate Lando, there was no argument. He did as he was told, and of course, it's all just gathering experience and momentum for him because he sees the bigger picture, whereas it's the other side of the garage, unfortunately, with Lando, where I see that there could be a bit of volatility, and the fact that, yes, Oscar was green, he's not driven a car competitively for a year before he had stepped in to do a full season last year, and then he didn't get the upgrades until after Lando did, obviously, so he was naturally on the back foot, but also learning. So it is dangerous when we do see Oscar completely unlock his potential, that what kind of Lando are we going to see? Because while we praise Lando for his talent, and, I'm a big fan of Lando as well, he is not the coolest of characters. And that's what worries me a little bit. We have seen him get flustered before, and everyone will be quick to say Russia 21, it was a win that kind of washed away with the rains in Sochi that day. But at the end of the day, he made the call. And whether it was the right call, we know the answer to that. And we saw him in qualifying at times late last year where, potentially he was in the hunt for pole position, where just a little mistake comes through. And yes, he's still young. He's 24 years of age. It's young, but then by Formula One standards, you could be world champion by then. Ask Vettel and Verstappen, but it's where I see a bit of risk in this lineup that. I think Oscar Piastri definitely has, no limit to unlocking his potential at the moment. But Lando, just until that, I think we get that first race win and, get the monkey off the back, there's just going to be, there's a bit of uncertainty behind it. And he's one to easily get a bit flustered, I reckon, too.
And so coming to you finally, Tom, which position ranking has surprised you the most? Is it the McLaren on top of the list?
No, I think the chaps here, they've really covered off some good points about McLaren. I think they are probably the most evenly matched. If you look at how they performed in good results as the car got better, we saw the team's results increase. Then like Jawad said, as soon as Piastri got the upgrades, he was then sort of like, whoa, there's a reason why McLaren got him from his contract and basically made Alpine look like idiots. Although they do that, So McLaren, whilst they don't have all, sort of like all the results, compared to like a Mercedes or a Red Bull or Alonso in the Aston Martin, I agree that I think they're the most complete, or not the most complete, but they're the most evenly matched driver pair in the grid.
Excellent. So that brings us to the end of our list. Before we finish the show, we always give our panelists the opportunity to promote anything they're involved with. And of course, two of our panelists today are part of the GridTalk family, although everyone is part of the GridTalk family. But Owain, you're one of the GridTalk hosts. Tell us in 30 to 60 seconds all about the GridTalk podcast.
So the GridTalk podcast, obviously we cover all the races. So we currently run a race show, and we also do a preview show. The race shows are recorded live right after the session, up to 1 hour, just 1 hour after the session, and we go through all of the drivers and try and sort of tell their story of the race, give our panelists an opportunity to sort of give their take on what happened during the race and the performances and how good or bad they end up being from each of the. We go through the whole season like that. And even do special shows like this where we sort of round up our ratings for the drivers in the season.
Excellent. I think that was about 60 seconds. So, Tom, you are also part of the GridTalk family, but you are also involved in Formula Talk. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, so Formula Talk, it was the brainchild of Sophia, one of the panelists here at GridTalk. It covers anything non-F1. So last season it was F2, F3, F1 Academy. And this season I think we're branching out. I think we are branching out to things like Formula E and IndyCar. And so there'll be plenty of content coming from that. And everywhere you find GridTalk, you'll find Formula.
Absolutely. Definitely give it a listen if you're into the feeder series or series across the world. And Jawad, you're coming to us all the way from the future in Australia. So can you tell us about Hit the Apex?
If you're keen to know about it, it no longer exists actually, because I've decided to call it a day on Hit the Apex this year, but the back catalogue is available if you wish to go and listen to 6 or 7 years worth of F1 and V8 Supercars podcasts on all the good podcast platforms. But you can find me on my personal social media handles for X and Instagram, which is at Dr46, TH on the end, because Valentino Rossi and Doctor Who, they both are pretty cool things. And yeah, why not plug GridTalk merchandise on Redbubble as well, if that's still going, if there's going to be a new drop for this year too, that would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you check out the store. Lots of goodies on there, including t-shirts and coasters and all sorts. I think there's some notepads as well in there. You can find more from me on my YouTube channel, AHGP, where I show Ferrari how it's done by managing a Formula One team properly. I'm currently in the middle of a journey with Mercedes where I've taken them back to the top, and I've recruited a free agent, Oscar Piastri, to partner George Russell after Lewis Hamilton retired from the sport as an 8-time world champion. So come and join me there for some F1 manager fun. We do live streams, experiment videos, and all bits in between. And if you're new to GridTalk, or you've been a long-time listener, you know where to find us. But GridTalk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, as Owain rightly informed us. But you can also find us on Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our full back catalogue of shows with previews, reactions to qualifying, and race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. This will help us get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. And make sure you subscribe to the show so you know when we are going live. Every week we have a new episode released, and we will go live after qualifying and each Grand Prix. And of course, get involved in the conversation. Tell us your driver pair rankings in the comments. My thanks to Tom, Wayne, and Jawad for joining me today. And finally, thanks to you for joining us for today's Grid Talk podcast, presented by Bet Online. We'll be back soon with more F1 discussions, but it's goodbye for